And we're live. Hello, everybody. I'm Paula Collins, and this is the WNY Rapport with my co-host, Nikki Lawley, and our special guest, Dashita Dawson. Nikki, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me or no?
We can hear you. I think your image is frozen, but we do have Dashita with us. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Sheeta on the move.
Dashita is a woman on the move. Tell us about the parade yesterday, Dashita.
Well, definitely wish that you all could have joined us there. But 51st New York City Cannabis Parade was a fantastic day. As you can tell, I have lost my voice from being on the mic all day long, but also getting up from 5 o'clock in the morning to get to the park to set up in advance of getting ready to be the hostess with the mostest and the MC for the festival. So it's been quite a day, but I spent most of it sleeping and rejuvenating in a spa, which is where you are catching me going from one, appointment to a next, so to speak. But I feel really good after being in 193-degree sauna.
Very good. Sounds like you needed it for sure.
Yes. And by the way, I don't know. I just feel like cannabinoids and any spa experience is always a great thing. So there's that too.
There is that.
Which is a really nice segue to our main topic, which is moving the proposal or the recommendation hasn't happened yet. And so I like to make that very, very clear to people. Nothing as of now has actually changed except
Yep.
we have a recommendation. So what could you add to that for us?
Sure. I think people are really number one thing I'm noticing is like people really don't understand government. So let's just start by breaking down how agencies tend to work at most levels, but the federal level is probably the most complicated. It definitely is rivaled by New York City complication. And so if you're thinking about government in general, you should know that there is always an executive leader, sort of the CEO of said government. And for us, that's the president and the executive branch. There are things that the CEO can just get done, and or the executive branch can just get done. Descheduling, or rather decriminalization in total, is something that at any point there could be an executive order that could just do that. However, probably late 2022, we started to hear from out of the Biden administration a desire to relook at the scheduling of cannabis. And so there was an executive, I guess, the instruction for the federal Health and Human Services to relook at this. The Health and Human Services Agency reports to the White House, and so it's he appoints the head of it, and in that structure, they're part of the that executive branch. They don't reschedule, but they can certainly make the recommendation, like you just said, Paula. And so they recommended to the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, another agency, to actually do the rescheduling. They are responsible for the scheduling of drugs as well as the enforcement, hence the name, of any drug offenses at a federal level. And so for the last 50 plus years, they are responsible as well for, prosecuting and or attempting to eradicate the cannabis industry, both the illegal, and when California legalized, they've also, between 96 and 2011, arrested a lot of state licensed business owners as well. So I just want to clarify that history. And so they now had it in their hands that they had to look at the HHS recommendation and make a determination. So now, Paula, we've actually moved from recommendation to the DEA has determined that they will reschedule. However, it requires rulemaking. And that process means that they are going to spend some time, do some research, talk to hopefully experts like the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition and other people who are already doing this work to come up with a set of rules around what it looks like to have not cannabis, not marijuana, but specifically Delta 9 THC as a
Mm.
Schedule 3 instead of a Schedule 1. And then they will create these rules. It will go back to the executive branch, a particular committee for review, and then it will be released for public comment. And then, like any other rules, we get to, as the constituents, to weigh in on what we think the DEA has created. Typically, when there's a determination to move in a direction, it's rare for an agency to change their mind. Because, I mean, let's be honest, we already waited, what, 8 months for them to tell us that they are going to do this. So they've been in that time doing research. So it is a foregone conclusion that it will be rescheduled. It's just now, how will it be rescheduled?
So I'm going to pretend that I am a person on the street or a person in my office who might be a client. And I'm going to say to all of what you said, that several paragraphs, I'm going to say, cool. So it's decriminalized, right?
No.
Thank you. All right. Here's my, and that's probably several more paragraphs. And of course, therein lies my huge disappointment. But, you know, they didn't come from DC to find Paula and say, Paula, you tell us what we should do.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing, what you described to me as a lawyer, when I hear that, I'm hearing months and months of
Oh,
work.
And
yes.
months.
It takes a lot of work. It took several months for the HHS to come to a conclusion or a recommendation, and it took several months for the DEA to decide, yep, we're going to take that recommendation on.
Mhm.
Now, we can look at history and government, and often it'll tell us what will happen. So there's never been a case where the HHS has recommended something that the DEA didn't determine needed to also happen. So we've been guessing the DEA is likely going to do this. But yeah, I anticipate months, many months before we actually see the rules itself. And even then it will be a public record, a public comment period, which takes usually at least, in the case of federal, like sometimes they're 90 days, like they're very long periods. So you're talking about 3 months just for people to collect people's comments, and then they have to review them and of course make any amendments based on what they review. If you're banking on your 280E savings in 2024 or whatever, don't manage that P&L like you got some sense if you have a license, because it's not likely that this is going to be resolved before the election happens.
You read my mind, because as a tax attorney, I'm anticipating clients coming in and saying, oh, give me the good news. I know I've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars this year because 280E does not apply. And to which, unless something dramatic changes and they speed through this process, which really they can't. There are
Yeah.
certain benchmarks that they must reach, certain boxes they have to check off in this process for it to be properly done. So it, to me, it would be remarkable, historical, if by 12/31/24, which is the cutoff date for anything that's going to go on that next tax return that we file, if 280E had been deemed, if cannabis had moved from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, which by definition that takes it, means that 280E no longer applies, because
Right.
the definition of 280E is a Schedule 1 or a Schedule 2 substance.
Right.
So we have not yet gotten relief from 280E. Now, Nikki, before we logged in, Nikki said, oh, but banking is going to be fine. And I said, nope.
No.
So the thing about banking is it's its own little galaxy in a way.
Yes, we didn't mention anything about banking and those agency stuff. Yeah.
It's got its own systems, and even if it were to change dramatically today, again, there would have to be more guidelines written, more, we've got so much at stake with our banking system and making sure that everybody's okay with it, that the government is okay with it,
Right.
that
I
the
mean,
Safe Banking Act.
yes, when things happen fast and without opposition in government, you should always be a little worried that maybe there is something funny happening. And so I think we don't want this to be a fast situation. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people are looking for that savings, and I understand it's a critical part of, what makes it so difficult to manage a P&L for a licensed business. But as a person who's worked in this industry before moving into the public sector as a private sector strategist and consultant, you can manage the P&L if you do it smartly. Even in the 280E environment, there are profitable plant touching businesses. It's when you think that you're going to market away bad product or a lack of innovation or just some things that we've seen constantly on the West Coast that even in some cases come to the East Coast. Men just declared bankruptcy. You know, it wasn't a big surprise that they were not going to do well because they continue to lose money over and over again every year. So it, you know, even big companies don't manage the P&L well with the 280E environment. I will never ever pretend like there isn't a significant impact. It is significant, on the order of uh, like the books, in terms of just being able to expand, because when you make enough profitability you can reinvest in your company and you can expand and get bigger faster. And that is the problem when you're a small business. And so I get it, but I also know that this doesn't solve enough issues for the small business, and the 280E issue won't get resolved until it in fact does change to the new schedule, and that could be some time. And we want it to be some time because if we go by the history of the DEA, what we're building in New York is not viable. And every licensee, certainly every card licensee, but the ones that have background in being justice impacted, they would not be eligible for a DEA Schedule 3 license. And without our commenting on that, without our pushing the hand of DEA to actually do something different with the rules here than what is historically being done, it will make all the businesses that are worried about 280E pretty much at a very high risk of being enforced against. We need a Cole Memo 2.0. We need to start strategizing. How do we use this time to get the rescheduling rules to really align with supporting the businesses that exist today that are licensed?
How interesting. I have never really, and of course, that's why you're our cannabis czar for the city of New York, which really is kind of there are card licensees all over the state, but I never really thought about that dimension of a card licensee who by definition is justice involved, or not by definition. I mean, there are family members who were able to get consideration
Right.
under card, but those who actually had charges would
Mhm.
not qualify under any type of regimen that was managed or overseen by the DEA.
Not at all. So it's like people will say, "Oh, this gives us a pathway to legalization at the federal level." Maybe if you're Trulieve, or if you are one of these big companies that exist already in cannabis, and your CEO didn't, necessarily have a drug offense or any other offenses that the DEA, literally there's a list of things that exist now. Schedule 3 is not created. Like some people are talking about Schedule 3 like it just got created for cannabis. No, we have doctors and pharmacists that have a Schedule 2 license every day, and there's so much of a big background check that happens that to get these licenses. So it's not like they're creating a new license scheme for cannabis. So that's why we have to really fight back during this public comment period. And I'm really calling people to task to do your research now. Be prepared for when those rules drop. I hope you guys are going to be prepared to also, and I know you will, do some shows where we break it down, because it's going to be a long public comment period, and we need to be singing in a chorus, meaning not everybody's going to sing the same note. You might be an alto, I might be a tenor. Right now I definitely sound like a tenor, but I feel like we need to at least be singing in a chord of what we need from these rules in order for us to have an existence. Maybe it's not that the rules will let someone who has been previously impacted have a license, although that's what I would prefer, to really protect them. But maybe there is a Cole Memo 2.0 that protects the current. Cole Memo only protected medical operators, by the way, too. And our adult use frameworks really they're like unprotected. They're like playing football with no pads.
So I've got 3 points I want to hit on. And also, I've been talking, you've been talking. Unfortunately, your voice is catching it once again. And I don't want to block out Nikki, but the 3 points I want to make sure that we hit on. One is the FDA involvement, which I think will be quite, I am concerned that it will be so onerous for our small processors and manufacturers that it will be untenable. The second thing is the the Chuck Schumer, we reintroduced what was it, the MORE Act or COA, the day after this news broke. And so is it possible that we would have a federal act? Do you need a moment? Do you
I
need
do.
Nikki?
I'm actually transitioning right now, but I'm listening because I think I know where you're going with this
Uh-huh.
question, and I'm excited to answer it.
Okay. Could we get a magic wand or a magic carpet out of this morass?
I wish. I don't know that I could actually say that that's going to happen.
Oh, I think she froze. Nikki, can you speak?
I
Well,
can speak. I can speak.
U.S. Senator.
Woof,
oh,
woof.
wait, she's back.
She's back.
Can you
There
guys
she
hear
is.
me?
Yes.
We
Yes.
can
I'm
hear you now.
sorry.
You went away
Yeah,
for a moment, but maybe your
it's
video being off will help.
it's the weather here, and I apologize. We got to see very much a selling moment, especially here in New York, with U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer, reintroducing the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. I think that is what we needed from him, to sort of say he's doubling down on the fact that he supports descheduling fully and not the rescheduling effort, or rather, it's not knowing it's not enough. And so, but I just think, we don't see it being able to get through the Senate as a viable bill that gets passed, although there's support at the House level as well, obviously with the MORE Act, and has passed a few times. Its last time it passed, it had its most opposition, and some of it was very much back to the sort of war on drugs sort of mentality and commentary made by some Republicans on the floor. Overall, I feel like it's not enough support to see a bill get it all the way passed and onto an administration, the Biden administration's desk for a signature. I
Mhm.
just, yeah. And then, oh, by the way, all of this is going on the backdrop of we have an election too. Um,
Exactly.
and so we haven't even discussed what happens if the Biden administration doesn't win,
Mhm.
because
Which is
this has been orchestrated by them.
correct. Correct. And there
Not
is,
Nikki, look at you're hilarious right now. I'm dying because you're like,
well, I mean, I think we need to plan accordingly and to have options at least mentally sketched out, because it's a tough election. And of course there is the doubling down. There's the posturing, the what I call political theater uh, on the part of the Republicans to, I don't know to accomplish what, but but that's what they do. Um, so can I go back one step? So if I'm advising a small processor or a small cultivator or a small manufacturer here in New York, where they've only had to compete with New York State um, people at the same level. Also, they've only had to deal with the New York regs. But then with this, potentially, they could be competing with out of state producers as well as with FDA regulations. And so, am I correct to be concerned for the viability of those businesses?
I think you are. I mean, I think that's, there are layers to what concerned us at the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition. The layer starting with the fact that it doesn't decriminalize, right? So that to me, I think is paramount. The second thing is that it could recriminalize or really cause enforcement risk of the highest that we've ever seen since legalization in '96,
Mhm,
to licensees that exist, at least certainly in my jurisdiction in New York City. But the other really critical point is now it opens this up to big pharmaceutical companies that actually already exist in the Schedule 3 ecosystem. They already understand, they already have the license. They don't have to go through the rigmarole of really even understand how the DEA works. So while we'll be doing and training and acclimation to what DEA rules looks like, and like you said, advising clients at a small business, they are competing against really big companies that already are existing in that ecosystem or are at least tangential to it enough that it's an easy jump. If you are a company in Canada that's been doing, you use Tilray as an example, that you consider yourself more biopharmaceutical cannabis company, you now have an ability to jump into the game in the United States in a different way. They're celebrating in a different way about the rescheduling. And that's the part that people are not paying enough attention to. And those economics, our licensees do not have a chance.
No, they don't. Absolutely not. And I'm very concerned because it has been a struggle in New York. That is the understatement of the year from Paula Collins. But to come through, to come this far, and then to have this change that we think is a good thing. But the reality is, when I look at the details, it's almost like trying to compete with Walmart selling weed. To me, it's quite concerning. Nikki, I've kind of dominated. Let's hear from you. How about from a patient perspective? What are your questions? What are your concerns? You're the healthcare advocate.
From a patient perspective, I have not been a fan of the whole Schedule 3 thing. I mean, like, full transparency, I'm all about deschedule or bust. But if it happens, I mean, like, let's face it, the three of us are only three people that have a voice. And so decisions are going to be made without our opinions. Mm-hmm. So one benefit that I see with Schedule 3 is the ability to now do real research on it. But I fear going to the pharmaceutical model, they're just going to work on isolated components of the plant instead of the whole plant and its medicinal values. I think that they're going to, poo-poo smoking all the way. I'm nervous about losing my rights as a patient to choose my type of medicine that works for me. So I'm kind of sketched out about the whole Schedule 3 thing. I'm going to be honest. I today spoke at high tea time with Sativa Remedy. The majority leader was there. Leah Halton Pope was there. It was a pretty cool thing. And I was on the medical end, but Crystal literally was saying, you must be politically involved. Mm-hmm. If you don't understand it, learn it. Because your voice, I can't do this shit alone. I mean, she literally said that. I can't do this by myself. When we get to the federal level, every single person in this room, your family, your friends, we need all of your voices, because 1 or 2 or 10 or 100 people are not going to get this done. And she was so passionate about it. And I mean, for those of you who are watching from other states, I mean, Crystal Peoples-Stokes championed the bill for our MRTA, our whole structure in New York State. So, when you hear her saying this and like kind of pleading with everybody, like, it's no joke. You know what I'm saying? It's like you really take that seriously. And we had on the panel a researcher who works with Roswell Park, and she was sharing, they have a new center that's doing research for cancer and different things. And she's part of it. And I mean, that's great. But she's like, with the rescheduling, everything just becomes easier and more flow, because we're already doing that level of drugs, just what kind of Jashida was saying. We're already at that level. Like this would not be a big transition for us at all. This would be beneficial, and it would save us a lot of headaches. So from a research perspective, that's probably my only, and this is my understanding. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert by any means. Like the whole banking thing, they were talking about it today. They were saying, how about, getting SBA loans now if it goes to Schedule 3? Will that be possible? And I'm like, I don't think so. But
no, none of that changes really the risk profile. But it's also, if anything, I think the risk goes up. I don't know how you feel, Paula, but I feel like now when there's more rules at the federal level, banks now, they'll support the Schedule 3 licensed businesses. I feel I actually think there's more risk But I did also just want to make sure we are all on the same page. People think that we can't do research now, but literally we signed the largest cannabis policy reform bill, or the Biden administration did ever in 50 years, with the Medical Marijuana and Cannabidiol Research Expansion Act. That's been signed for over a year. And I'm like, well, where's the guidance on that? That was supposed to expand and make it easy for research, Nikki. And so that's already been signed. It was actually a unanimous vote in the Senate, which again, that's always like, when have they ever voted unanimously about anything related to
Anything,
cannabis?
ever.
But
I
there
don't
again,
know.
you see how slow things move in government.
So
It's
they,
just it literally a bill passed and now we have, so the question is rescheduling, will those rules be in place before we know what's going on with the Medical Marijuana and Cannabidiol Research Expansion Act? I hope not. And I hope if some things have been started so it can inform like how maybe rescheduling needs to work. I don't know. I think if the government speeds it up, it would be only because we're in an election year. I'll be honest, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if we were in an election year. I just think this is all a stunting in some ways. The only thing you said, the only thing you're talking about is research is the benefit. I can't even count that. I'll be honest, because I do feel like, again, we already cleared that board because we had that bill passed. I am only just happy the federal government is finally admitting that cannabis is medicine. Because the truth is that Schedule 1 has been such a bogus determination for so many decades. We've known before we even got to the scheduling. I mean, some would argue that the Schaefer report that told us and told Nixon, hey, this is not going to need to do any Schedule 1, just decriminalize it. We've known. And so that's the biggest thing we got out of this, was finally getting an administration to admit that cannabis is medicine.
Very reluctantly, I must add.
Yes.
Very reluctantly.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think no matter what, that's partly why you don't see me rejoicing. I know there's a lot of celebration about the 280E. I'm not going to ever act like those things aren't having their effect on companies now, but I'm worried about criminalization of my licensees. I'm worried about viability of our markets beyond a rescheduled, world. And I think people are being short-sighted about what it looks like to play in a water or pool with the Goliath. Is like, soon as he splashes his leg, all the water is going, and you David get thrown out the pool. It's a difficult path for us to imagine. And I think some people think me saying it, I'm a government official. I'm saying it because I know government now, and I understand that there's some real challenges and administrations turnover in the middle of a strategy. And so if this happened even before the election, for example, and then we didn't get another Biden administration, what would this look like under, a Trump administration or whoever is, the other? I just think at this point, there's so much risk that we should be looking at if the federal government even comes on the board in any way, shape, or form with just providing rules. And we just have to arm ourselves with as much precedent and information about what it is. And New York is critical to this because we have so many consumers, we have so many constituents, and we are a big GDP state for the country. We have a role to say, hey, this does work for us here and this doesn't. But it's all happening in a perfect storm. I want to just make a second for us to understand from a top line perspective, the federal government is hearing all the same media. New York is a disaster. It's going too slow. Meanwhile, again, over a year ago, a bill was signed. We still have no guidance on it, right? Like at the federal government. So we're losing our capabilities to be a leader among the conversation at the federal level. Meanwhile, there's a perception that Florida is going so well. Florida has the largest medical program in the country, and from a dollars perspective, and they are still able to arrest people and keep it in law and order. You don't have any illegal stores all in every corner. This is the guidance that federal government and agencies, in which they are like, at least the context they are building these rules. So we've got to do what we got to do in New York to demonstrate more. what we've done that's excellent and what we've done that we can improve and optimize again. But also stop allowing us to tell the narrative about us doing something that's just not true. I feel people are saying we're moving too slow when they doing it without recognizing how slow every other state has moved. It's a relative game. It's the assumption you can make something like this big industry created overnight after we've destroyed it in 50 years, some would say 80 or more, that is like absurd to me. So my call to action is for us to like really look at what we're doing and building in New York, pull out the really good stuff, highlight it, yell it from the top of our, voices, and then also look at what can we do to create solutions to improve where we've seen the need for more work in New York, because it still needs more work for sure.
So my advice for my clients right now is to stay alert, continue to plug in to get more and more information, but for right now to continue business as we have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that that is accurate, or am I missing some piece that I need to deliver to my clients?
No, I agree with that fully. Nothing's changed on paper, sentiment, yes, perhaps.
Mhm.
But stay the course, and also let's get ready for what's going to be required. Over the next couple of months, I really feel like agencies at the federal level will be doing their research. And that means interviewing licensees potentially, or wanting to talk to local and state authority and regulation. And so I'm really looking for New York to step up and kind of come to the table with coalition messaging around what needs to happen at a federal level. And not, yes, we want to still saying deschedule needs to happen. So put the pressure still there, but like specifically under the assignment, if we have no choice of federal rescheduling, what do we need in that framework to really ensure our survival? And that's what I'm going to be focused on. And I'm going to be disseminating as much information as I can about that, because for me as a strategist, that's the block we need right now.
My
I
concern,
100% agree on that. I mean, I feel like we really need leaders that are preparing against this fight, if you will, because anything the government does always has pros and cons. But I feel like they don't know shit about cannabis. And so at the end of the day, we need experts like you, like me, like Paula. We need everyday people that are using this plant in ways that they just don't understand. People don't know what they don't know. And I mean, every single day I see it. I see the judgment, the, snarls, the, whatever, just because people smell cannabis and
Mm-hmm.
they just don't know any better, and we have to like really go back to the basics and educate. And so I feel like part of the foundation is to make sure that those making the rules are all on the same page with, okay, this is what we have in our body. We have an endocannabinoid system. This is, we've recognized it as medicine now. But for those people that are just coming in to the legislative aspect, they might not understand the plan at all. So we've got to teach them. And they have to learn from people's stories, from people's experiences, what's worked and what hasn't worked. Right now, the news never talks about the good things that New York has done or the good things that have happened because of cannabis. You just hear about the woman whose son killed himself that has like, a mental health schizophrenia situation, and she blamed dabbing on why he killed himself. Well, I dare say I'd love to know what antipsychotics he was on and
Mm-hmm.
what he was doing. Was he drinking? Was he, besides dabbing, like they only portray just this much of it. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so much more to it. So I guess, Dashita, I mean, I support you. I've supported you literally since the second I met you. You just are so full of knowledge and so full of true, genuine expertise. And you being a strategist in your former life, and you still are, you could just, I don't know, I want to do Dashita for president. Can we do that?
No, girl.
Can we turn that into
No,
Republican?
the White House don't want me there. No, listen, I am. I don't want to live there either. But I will say, I'm fighting for my own life, right? Like, so I'm patient first. You know that, Nikki. And I'm not sure if you know that, Paula, but I'm a
Mhm.
cannabis patient. I'm registered in New York. And I have been, using cannabis as medicine for now 15 years, really deliberately, and very much from the legacy market first, because that's what I was only really available to me, and moved to Arizona after my mom died to get into not to get into the industry, to get a legal card, really to live better. So I made that move, and getting a legal card, I went to one dispensary to do my first like real legal shopping experience. And right away I was like, oh, I don't really understand how y'all are representing this beautiful plant, these molecules, this just pharmacy in this way. And it was a whole bunch of things that hit me all at once. Happened to be Arizona trying to get legalization, and didn't get it in 2016, and that was the first real thing I worked on, that was sort of political, it was civic lessons 101. I was like, oh my gosh, we're missing it, understanding how all of these things work together, all these branches, all these agencies. And it is fascinating, but it's also frustrating, because it's incredibly unproductive sometimes, and purposely so. And as a person who is, coming into my prime, dealing with an autoimmune issue, knowing that cannabis is allowing me to do it in my best self, I felt a way that even though I'm doing this legal, I still feel like there's a lot of dignity missing in this entire process that I was no longer willing to stand for. And I felt like I had to insert myself in a way. And so that's how I came into the industry, really, because I felt like ain't nobody going to explain what is happening from a patient perspective better than the patient. And why not do so while also demonstrating sort of the power of cannabis and its many opportunities and, strengths and things that we just don't get to do, from many angles. There's the business angle, there's the policy angle, and honestly, there's the culture angle too. Everybody's got their swag. Everybody's got the way they use and consume. People talk about my little pipe in my bag, and I have a very particular way in which I consume, and it doesn't have to be in a group, because guess what? When my leg hurts, it doesn't matter whether y'all are waiting to go roll a joint together. So there's so many myths busted just by personal experience,
Percent.
and that is what I feel like is always going to drive me. And so I think I'm doing government because I had to. It was a strategic move. Not I had to because I needed money. No, I had to because this industry is so dysfunctional for a patient. And that is so effing frustrating. It is just the most frustrating thing. I shouldn't have to deal with it. You shouldn't either. And I think government is really a culprit to it, because they were dealing with, I went to my first state, and it was clear business was driving it, big lobbyists were driving it, and they were making such terrible mistakes. And then finally, when community rises up and business kind of pairs with them, there was a few markets I was in, and oh my God, I loved it. The business and community, they work together, but then government still messing it up because they just don't know, or they have a fear. Or it is business, community, all of it has to work with government. That's why I made the coalition, that trifecta coalition. I feel like if you don't do it where there's that happening all the way through, nothing gets done. And we lose it at the end of the day. We're the patients, the access is lost. So, because that's it. Let's talk about what it looks like for access, for example, with the Schedule 3. It's less. You said it perfectly. You're not anticipating they're going to use whole plant preparations as what they get FDA approved. No Schedule 3 license will be able to sell anything but FDA approved products, of which right now we really only have one real cannabis one, that's Epidiolex. And even though Marinol, these are synthetics, so I don't really count them, but they count as cannabinoids, sort of. But I guess I'm saying to say that we should expect the same, those type of products, right? You're not gonna, all of a sudden see that they're gonna be developing and understanding strains or chemovars and the plant itself. I just don't see the pharmaceutical model really respecting that yet. And so those are things we have to either write in or, look to fight and demonstrate, because we will be fighting an uphill battle for that.
I totally agree. It's almost like you feel like all the politicians all need to have a learning hands-on experience. Like they need to have a demo, you
You
know?
know what the problem is, though, Nikki? They having a demo, but their demo is going to a consumption lounge in Nevada, right? Like that's the problem. Where like you're getting the wrong demo.
Got it.
I've been on these tours where people learn about things. I've even hosted them when I was the Portland Cannabis Czar. We hosted many states, and you know what they want? They want to come in and figure out how people are having fun with it, I guess, but shocked about the wellness aspects. We were curating tours that included almost everything, because I really didn't like that, oh, they just want to see a dispensary. And I'm like, well, there's so much more. And so that's the challenge. We are doing research, but they're going to the thing that everybody knows of, and instead of really diving deep. We did a sort of city-wide training, but it wasn't mandatory, and we didn't get a lot of people that took it that involved ACAM. And I'm proud about it, at least us putting together a 4-part series, and it is available on demand, and people can still take it in the city of New York. But it only works, I feel like, if it's like a requirement. You want to work to do something to oversee cannabis, you are required to learn this history, the science, and then you could go work on it.
Totally makes sense.
In my campaigning around the state, it's been interesting to talk with people who are not in our world, because I do believe that our cannabis community can be very much like a bubble where we're talking to each other, and we think we've hit on something and the rest of the world hasn't even heard of it. But what has been really interesting is to talk to people from outside the bubble who are actually quite accepting of cannabis. And for the most part, it has to do with what will be coming back to the communities in terms of tax revenues. If there is a disappointment, it's because they were expecting that by now they would already be receiving a steady stream or a more generous stream of those tax revenues than they currently are in New York.
Really?
Really.
Wow, that's so crazy to me. I'm almost shocked, because I feel like it takes so long for government to pay out anything.
I think the upstate communities that are so broke, towns that really even counties where there are more cows than people, counties where there are a few stoplights and they don't work. That they were thinking that when Cuomo signed that bill in 2021, that by now in 2024 they would have seen some dollars come in, and because of various things they haven't. So uh, they eagerly anticipate that date. But segue to a federal framework, or like I haven't yet downloaded what Chuck Schumer reintroduced. I'm thinking it's the same thing or very similar to what he introduced a few years ago, which I did really study. And there was a 12% federal excise tax. So if we're going to include that 12% federal excise on top of New York state tax, again, the businesses are going to have to readjust their business model. That's a whole lot of tax.
Yes. If that were to pass, we'd have to adjust a lot of what we're doing at the state level. So something more comprehensive like that, I think, has a ripple effect beyond like just capping on top of what the state does. But at the end of the day, it still winds up being probably compounded into more tax implications that the consumer has to deal with, which means the business owner has to kind of contend with pricing. I am looking forward to solving some of those puzzles in the future. I know I haven't like taken a real deep look into the new act, just prepping for the parade, kind of been heads down until
Yeah.
then. So I'll probably have to come back on and talk to you all about it once I understand if there's anything changed. Because to be honest, safer and safe it's not that different either, you know.
Right,
So
exactly.
I mean,
It's a way to get the bill reintroduced, I think.
yeah, but I think they, again, I feel like, I said earlier, I feel it was a little bit symbolic, right, to say, oh yeah, we are still champion for descheduling, let's not lose the fight on it. And every time we take a look at these bills, I think it's an opportunity for us to optimize what we want and what we need. So that's definitely something I'm excited about. But I do think we can't project, and I actually feel we have to do a little bit more short term thinking, more 3 months, 6 months, a year, as opposed to 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. You generally a really good forecaster, and I love that I wrote a workbook because I can sometimes go back and be like, dang girl, you was, I don't know, man. It might have been the Durban poison, but I was forecasting, and it's some of these things coming to pass. And I think that's just the gift I've always had. I did it well at Target for the businesses I ran, and at Victoria's Secret too. But in my forecast, if we got what we have on the table now with the rescheduling, and the states are still figuring out. We had a number of states flip into adult use, but then we also saw unprecedented things like the Virginia governor was like, we're not going to have no way to get it in Virginia. I do think we're still playing, like we have to stay the course, that we're playing for the lead, New York, of being able to demonstrate that you can drive equity and success in a market, and not chaos, which has been in other markets that had an equity framework like Illinois. But I just think in general, we're still dealing with the media perspective of chaos, and even like more and more the equity being on trial to help make this perception of chaos. But we've done quite a bit, and I'm excited and proud about that. But I just can't predict that far ahead to see, okay, what does this look like with the framework stacked on top of each other? Is it regular Uno game, or are you taking it where you could just keep draw four, draw four, draw four? I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet.
I mean, it's a very, very, very complex issue, and
Hmm.
people that think they understand it, they really don't understand it. I mean, I was literally in a Facebook group, little off topic of Schedule 1, but New York State home grow for adults is not legal unless you have a medical card currently. I mean, it is, it's in, like, you know what I'm saying, right?
It's
Like,
in
I
public
literally,
comment, isn't it? Or
huh?
we've just concluded a comment period.
Did we
Yeah, we
conclude it?
have a comment period that's about to end.
Mhm.
We worked to do a regulatory policy review session, and so hopefully there'll be a coalition comment submission as well as the city of New York. Hmm.
But as far as somebody boldly stating that home grow is now legal in New York for anybody other than a medical patient, that is simply not correct.
Uh, yeah, no, there's no adult use. You have to have your medical
Right.
card.
Right. So if anybody needs a medical card, Nikki and the plant has medical cards available.
You got your plug in,
I
Nikki.
love the plug, Nikki. Do it.
Nikkiandtheplant.org, friends. Hit that resource tab and boom, slay, jump on that leaf well. Get yourself a card for $99. Use code PLANT and you even save $10.
Love
Boom,
it,
slay,
Nikki.
people.
Boom slay. My concern is if we move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, that will be the most sweeping cannabis reform in our generation. And of course, Chuck Schumer kind of rescued me from my misery by reintroducing, I call it COA. I don't know if that's the proper way to put those letters together, but reintroducing the cannabis. I always want to mix up
Cannabis
opportunity,
administration and opportunity.
administration, and yeah, I think that's where I get mixed up.
KO.
Yeah, I definitely don't use those the letters together. It doesn't do it for me. So that's why I say it every time, and I've gotten practice in saying it every time. But it is a long,
It
and
is long.
it is a lot. But it is, in fact, what he's saying, that there's an administration framework he's putting in it, and of course, opportunity needs to be built into the framework. That's debatable as to what that means. I also think it's probably the most, general language that doesn't have any extra connotations to it, which is like needed in the Senate, in my opinion, for its palatability. But yeah, Yeah, I don't know. I've never heard her say cower, but I like that.
But
I
but
like it.
I think were you on a panel in Boston that I heard? And there was I finally got it. It finally like made sense to me why my gut was saying to me, no, if we go to Schedule 3, that's kind of that's a bad thing.
Hmm.
And it was because somebody from the stage, and I don't remember her name, said they never come back to get those things that we left behind.
Yes.
They never come back to get the people.
Yes.
They never come back to get the civil rights. They never
Mhm.
come back to get those little things that we didn't get into this new
Yep.
piece of legislation. They're not going to come back. And so my concern is that we're going to get this Schedule 3, and that's going to be it for our generation.
Well, I of course don't hope not. I definitely hope that, people like myself continue to enter the ranks of government to push the envelope on that, to say basically, nah, we're not, well, that's not what we're doing this time. But it takes more of us doing that. I do not believe that we should be dying on the hill of incrementality. I think that's why I refuse to do too much celebrating. That we can leave that for the streets. And for me, as a person doing the work, it's like, oh, they just did a move, and now we have to look at the chessboard and decide what will be our move. How we will counter this, because at the end of the day, it can't stop here, and we know that. I think part of us not countering it is having a champion like Senator Chuck Schumer, throw us back in the ring and a conversation to say, let's change the narrative up. We're not going to be talking about rescheduling for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, like it's, it is the only thing, and we have no other hope. And I think that's why it's good he did reintroduce this. It'll be meaty discussion, but if anything, for me, it's going to be, I'm taking pieces of it, and what are those things that need to be protected that maybe rescheduling leaves a little bit too open, and how do I start crafting a protection of those things within the confines of what we know we can do over there. The Cole memo protected us. The DEA was absolutely arresting people between 96 and 2011. And so I'm going back to the playbook, right? What worked before, it couldn't work again. And to your point, how do we keep the, conversation moving forward? I think we have to continue to look into the patient stories. Access should not be controlled by a prescription. We just were talking about this idea that you can only home grow if you have a medical card, and we're doing adult use rules, but this is a plant that truly, even the way we were looking at the rules, there's all these, constraints around immature plants. People aren't master cultivators. Duchess pointed out that, like, you having the same number of immature plants allowed as mature plants is assuming that you're going to have 100% yield of your plants turning into something that you can, do anything with. And even those plants may still only yield a little bit of bud or flower or medicine. It's like, it's still controlling something that I feel like I should have a human right to, and it should just be a lot easier access. And so that fight will never stop. And I think we have to keep illuminating the past, which is the government has always known. We already knew this before it happened. We lost 50 years. And to your point, Paula, let's not lose another 50, like just becoming drones to a system. Let's figure out the way that, we re-engineer it. Some people say that might be breaking the system, but if it's still moving and it's still working, and they're like, we're re-engineering it. But that area might be down for a little bit until we are able to re-engineer it in the way we need to. I personally think the DEA is not the right place to do that research, because they've historically made money on eradicating and suppressing marijuana. And so I feel we're in an uphill battle because of just the dynamics of who controls what. But it doesn't mean that we don't have a way to still win.
I feel that. I feel that. I mean, truly, you are a change maker, and you have made so much change. And I've watched you, this sounds kind of corny, but blossom and fucking grow. I mean, you literally you bloomed and you grew, and you've learned, and I learn from you every day. Every time I see you on a podcast, I always take something away because you just have a great way of explaining things and really breaking it down for people that really don't get it. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with OCM is they don't have somebody breaking it down to the people. It's all so high level that people really don't get politics.
Mhm.
Like, back in high school when you took student government or whatever the hell it was, I mean, like, I'm 54 years old. That shit happened in like a long time ago. I don't remember the House, the Senate, exactly what does what, and I mean, it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but like what I do know, I really know, but what I don't know, I really don't. And
Right.
so having someone that can kind of dumb it down and like you can't just tell people to learn it, right? Everybody learns stuff differently.
They do.
So
Mhm.
having that example that you've been able to create with your personality, your persona, and who you are and your authentic self has been so helpful for someone like myself who really didn't get it, didn't really understand politics at all. Like, I was just a patient that used cannabis, I just found it and it changed my life. And
Mhm.
so I've become a very unapologetic advocate for the plant and trying to give voice to those that don't have one and trying
Mhm.
to help those kind of curious people not be so scared of it. And, every single day I change hearts, minds, and lives in some way. You don't even realize the impact that you make on other people. And so I guess, Jashida, that's why I'm sharing this with you, that what you do is really powerful and it really, really, really helps a lot of people. And I really mean that. And I'm not trying
Thank
to butt
you.
in.
Thank you. Well, the dance too. I love that. Y'all very
Well,
funny.
when we have had we didn't even do like the grand welcoming of our guest because we were so screwed up with the technology thing. Like that
And you
has
guys are
never
taking me
happened.
on the fly, so I appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you so much. And we prevailed upon your kindness and your voice. And so I really am so grateful to you for being here this evening.
No, it was a very important conversation. I think these are the moments that is not about my job. It's more, well, one, Nikki knows that she can ask me and I pretty much would do what I can. And I've always done that with her. So she knew that. But also it is important. And I just knew it would be a good conversation. And I'm very passionate about just these are the archives. These are also the things of me being able to say I'm sharing with you. I'm telling, and I'm also sometimes I'm right. And
There's
then
no question.
that's the part that I'm more and like I'm looking back at the last nearly having a decade in the industry like that have been very, very predictive of what's going to happen, and I'm leaning in more on that. It doesn't mean that I'm not wrong sometimes, but I feel like the government is very telling and we just have to tune in a little bit more like it's a reality show, except it's our reality and we have to be a little bit more of the producers, if that makes any sense.
I like
Yeah,
that.
it does. I like it too.
That's really good. And I think that's a good place to leave it. What do you think?
Yeah. Jashida, thank you. You are our true hero in every sense of the word. Paula, you being the lawyer, you and Dashida being able to lawyer speak back and forth and political speak, that was great. I was really just enjoying the conversation. Like, I wasn't feeling muted at all. But this has been the Western New York Report and your host, co host, Paula Collins, and myself. And we absolutely loved having Dashida Dawson, the czarina of New York City.
Zarina. Okay.
So thank you, friends, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Same place, same time. Thanks, guys.